We switched up because we have, here we go. Labor Council and its affiliates welcome a CLC leadership candidate team. Sister B, Lily, and B, Lily, and Siobhan. Sisters, we have numerous locals here that are represented and a number of leaders, delegates, and pretty much everyone, I was going to say and activists, everyone in this community, in the labor community, are activists. Being team, how about you have the mic for a total of up to 5 minutes? The questions then will happen. Questioners, we've already got a number of people that told me they want to ask questions. Questioners, let's try to stay in the 30 to 40 second range so that we got lots of time to get lots of questions. I do have the list of questions. And once that list is done, perhaps we'll add a few more. Sisters, thank you very much for coming. I'm sure you're full on before, I think it's June 16th. And again, welcome to Windsor, Essex, the center of the universe in the labor community in this country.
Thank you so much for that, Brian. I'm going to actually switch it up and have Siobhan start, and we'll make our way through Siobhan, Lily, and then myself, and then we're happy to take questions.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for making time for us today in your meeting. I'm joining you from Amiskwaciwakaikan, which is Edmonton here in Treaty 6 territory. And to introduce myself, I am Siobhan Vipond, and I'm running to be your vice president at the CLC. I'm so excited that we get this moment to introduce Team Unite, of course, which I am a part of. I am an IATSE member. I was a stage and film technician. I have also, for the past 8 years, served as the Secretary Treasurer at the Alberta Federation of Labor. I come from a union family, and I'm really excited to bring those values that I learned from a very young age, which were about fairness and using our collective power to stand up to those who try to attack us, to the work of a labor central, because it's really about that bigger picture. Like many of you, I ended up volunteering on committees, and then my activism brought me to the position where I am today. I am happy to be running with a team where we can see a vision, where we understand the importance of the politics and how the labor centrals can be to influence that those politics, because we can be a force to be reckoned with. And that is so important in terms of us doing the politics of working with those in power, making sure that they're prioritizing workers, but also the partisan politics to ensure that when workers go to the ballot box, that there is a real option for workers to have. I also think the community building that we do within labor centrals is so important. And at the district labor councils, you are so aware of this. Because we need to have more voices at the table. We need to be listening to more people to ensure that our House of Labor really reflects everybody, and that making room for everybody in the House of Labor takes intention and energy. So we are very much rooted in workers and workers' rights and listening to workers and making sure that workers' voices are there, because there's power in our collective action, and the House of Labor can be that force. So I'm excited to be here with the two other great leaders that I'm running with. And so I'll pass it to Bea so she can speak.
Please unmute yourself, Bea.
Sorry about that. Lily, would you like to go next and just say a few words? Lily, you have to unmute.
I did the same thing. Hello, sisters, brothers, friends. I'm joining you from Toronto, the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples. I'm Lily Chang, Executive Officer for QP Local 79, representing 22,000 municipal workers for the City of Toronto. And I'd like to just share a little bit with you about my path to activism and why I'm running for the position of CLC Secretary Treasurer. So after I got a job at Seneca College. I was an OPSU member then, but not really connected with my union. And that changed when I applied for a new job and was denied the promotion. So I grew up believing that life was pretty fair. You work hard, you'd be rewarded. And I was learning that in the working world, this wasn't the case. So I went to my union for advice. And that's when I learned about grievances and the important role that the union plays in defending and advancing workers' rights. And I found that my pursuit of fairness and union involvement went hand in hand. So I signed up to be a steward. And then in 1989, I got hired as a caseworker for Metro Toronto and became a QP member. So in 2005, I was elected treasurer and served for 13 years in that role. And during this time, I got our financial house in order and oversaw some major projects. One that I'm most proud of is the acquisition of our office building in downtown Toronto, which ensured our financial stability. So my years on the Labor Council has given me the opportunity to focus on bigger picture political issues. And I've really enjoyed working with activists across sectors to protect important public services and to elect the right people to City Hall. My financial experience combined with my wish to play a role in a broader labor movement is why I'm running to be your next CLC Secretary Treasurer. Go ahead, Bea.
Thank you for that, and thank you again for having us. So I'm Bea Bruske. I'm a UFCW member from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Treaty 1 territory, home of the Anishinaabe, the Ojibwe, the Oji-Cree, the Dene and Dakota people, and of course, homeland of the Métis Nation. And I'm really proud to be running for the position of president of the CLC. I don't come from a labor family. My family moved to Canada when I was 12 from Germany, and when I was a teenager, like many of us, I got my first job in a retail store, in a grocery store. And when I turned 20, I got to go to my very first union meeting, and it happened to be a strike vote meeting, which led to us being on strike for 125 days on a long, hot Winnipeg summer. So it was a very long, intense strike. There were a lot of folks who crossed the picket line, a lot of, neighbors, friends, co-workers, teachers who went in there to get those really good deals that Loblaw was trying to get so that they could push their concessions through. And there was no doubt in the mind of the folks that I was on the picket line with that at that point, they wanted to crush the union. They did not want to have to deal with us. We persevered. It was 4 very long months, and it set the blueprint for what I was going to do with the rest of my life, and that's working in the labor movement. I had an opportunity to go to the University of Manitoba and take an arts degree in labor studies, and at that time was also elected to my local's executive board. I'm from a 20,000 member local in Manitoba, and we have members all across the range from retail workers, warehouse workers, security workers, healthcare workers, and everything in between all across this province. I spent 10 years as a servicing representative, going into workplaces, filing grievances, enforcing collective agreements, 10 years as a full-time negotiator, just doing bargaining, one round to the next round. And since 2012, I've been the full-time secretary treasurer of my local, and I still deal with negotiations for across Canada employers. And of course, I also look after the finances. I've had an opportunity to serve as the MFL executive VP for the Manitoba Federation of Labor, and I've done a stint 3 rounds as an employee representative on the Manitoba Labor Board, actually hearing cases that are going to the Labor Board for those employees who are unionized and many times not unionized, who are dealing with major issues with their employer that have to go to a Labor Board hearing. I'm extremely passionate about being active in the NDP, and I see that Tracy's on this call with us, which is fantastic, and she's going to be great again, standing up for working people, as she always does. And so I'm really excited about that. And, making sure that we grow our connection with the federal NDP is hugely important to me. I'm very active provincially with our provincial NDP, and I was a candidate in the last election against our premier, which was definitely an interesting experience. Long story short, we have 3 overarching pillars that we really believe that Labor needs to accomplish, and I'm super excited that Lily and Siobhan and I are a team because we share the same values and the same priorities that we want to bring to the House of Labor. And first and foremost, that's to build solidarity, the type of solidarity that we don't just say to one another when we see each other, but that we actually live. And that means that we have to build some really strong relationships where we can sometimes agree to disagree, but still figure out what our common issues are and push those forward together. Secondly, we need to actually engage workers. I'm not sure about you folks, but I know within my own union, making sure that members are interactive and attending meetings and participating is always a challenge. We need to bring participation to the broader labor movement so that workers are understanding what their rights are and that they're feeling compelled to participate and stand up for themselves and for their coworkers. And lastly, I already noted this is the participation within the political piece, because as Siobhan mentioned, so many members don't necessarily understand the connection between that mark that they're putting on the ballot box and the reality that they're living in their workplace and in their communities. And so we need to get back to making sure that political action is at the center of everything that we do. So I would love to throw it open for questions. And again, thank you for having us.
Thanks, sisters. Good stuff. We'll start off with Dave Cassidy, President, Unifor 444. Go ahead, brother.
Thanks, Hoagie. I appreciate it. And thank you to the Unity team for being here. Welcome to Windsor and Essex. I am the president of Unifor Local 444 here in Windsor, and unfortunately, I won't be able to participate in putting an X on the ballot. So that's one of the things that I'm glad you mentioned, Bea. And in Windsor and Essex, you need to know that we have great relationships, and that's why Windsor District Labor Council continues to operate the way it does. On this call today, you'll see a lot of Unifor members that are on the call. And part of your comments you made about the 3 pillars, the solidarity part was very big for us. And really, my question would be, what does the Unity team feel, or how does the Unity team feel that are going to engage the Unifor group to bring them back into the House of Labor? Because I can tell you, we don't get along every single day, all of us affiliates. There's a lot of affiliates on here, but we have a good relationship in Windsor and Essex County, and we're going to continue to do that. And I'm hoping from the national level that this team will be able to bring that together. So just maybe a couple comments on that. I'd really appreciate it, Bea.
100%. Thank you for that, Dave. And I think that's such an important point. Making sure that we find a path for Unifor to come back to the House of Labor is a priority for us. Not just Unifor, but also looking at bringing Teamsters back and all of the other unions that are out there that are not already affiliated. Because at the end of the day, we are stronger together, and that is going to mean making some difficult decisions and having some hard conversations with folks. And, we have to recognize that we have sometimes diverging interests and diverging priorities. And that's never been more clear to me than when I sat at a joint bargaining table with 7 other unions in Manitoba dealing with public sector bargaining. It was easier to bargain with the employer than it was amongst ourselves, because of course we all have different priorities and we're trying to be as responsive as we can to our members. But we have to keep the overarching goal in mind. And the overarching goal is that we have to fight against them, not against one another. And so too often we seem to lose sight of that. So making sure that we do an outreach strategy to leadership within Unifor, to leadership within the Teamsters, and to all of those other unions that are not already affiliated is a really high priority for this group. And then finding ways that we can find some common ground so that we can start paving that road back together.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thanks. Next up, Brian Brown, President, University of Windsor Faculty Association, past president, long time, many years as the president, currently past president. Brother Brian Brown. You see him there, Maddie?
I believe is Brian, can you unmute yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yes, brother. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, as Brian said, I'm past president of the Windsor University Faculty Association, past president of the Ontario Confederation of University Faculty Associations, and also past president of the CAUT Defense Fund. So welcome to Windsor, as Dave said. Glad that you're here and listening to us. And I can only echo and agree with what Dave just mentioned in terms of the question he asked, bringing everyone together under the House of Labor and how you would go about that. So thank you for your answer. And just so you know, as Dave said, we are all in this together here in our labor movement in Windsor. So we stand by each other. My question is in regards to the situation at Laurentian University and what has happened under the Companies Creditors Arrangement Act. And it's really a travesty in terms of what has been happening up there and what could possibly happen to other universities or other sectors. So I'd like to just get your thoughts on the subject in terms of what it is that you think should be done to try and get this situation resolved and get Laurentian University back on its feet. Thank you.
So thank you for that. And we have been speaking with some of the profs at Laurentian University, and we've also spoke with Newcott earlier this week or last week, sorry, it's all kind of jamming together in terms of the amount of folks that we're speaking to. But one thing that's really clear to us is that there has to be priority given on public investment in our universities and post-secondary education facilities. And that has to be not just in the urban centers, but also in the various different regions of our country, quite frankly, because we have a lot lot of underserved population that needs to be able to have access to post-secondary education. So in this particular case with Laurentian, I know that there's a number of different asks right now and a number of different ways for folks to participate to put pressure on the provincial government in Ontario, and we're supportive of that. Outside of that, we need to make sure that this becomes an election issue both provincially and federally to make sure that public investing is happening in our post-secondary education facilities. And it goes back to also making sure that voters understand that when you take a facility like this out of a community, it has dire effects, not just on the students that want to participate in education there, but on the community as a whole in terms of lost jobs and economic revenue, right? So it needs to be a broader, not just a one-time paying attention to this issue, but this needs to be an ongoing issue for us all to focus on.
Okay, thanks for that. Just to follow up on another one, in terms of the students, have you had any contact with the Canadian Federation of Students or the Ontario Federation of Students?
We have not as yet. No, we have not.
Okay, that might be something that you could reach out to, some of the students who are involved.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm making a note.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian, and thanks, Sister B. Tish Glenn's on the call. Her throat voice is bugging her. Her allergies are acting up, but also, like a lot of union activists, presidents, working crazy hours over the last 14 months. She's from CUPW 630. Here's her question. Bargaining with a crown or government, the deck is clearly stacked. Trudeau doesn't care to bargain, and then people get legislated back if they're out on strike. And this is my comment. I'm sure Tish agrees. He's no better than Harper. I mean, he's worse because he said he would actually take care of the posties. B and team, what are your plans to help Tish's union and others that have to deal with the feds and these kind of bargaining when there's federal workers?
Yeah, and we don't just see it in the federal aspect with the postal workers, and of course, most recently with the dock workers in Montreal. But in my own province of Manitoba, we've had IBEW Hydro members out on strike for 60 days now, who are still waiting for a collective agreement. And of course, this government is simply waiting out their alternative dispute resolution time. And it goes back to what I said earlier. It pains me to say this, but I guarantee you that there are a number of folks who are directly impacted by these labor disputes and by being legislated back to work, who voted for those same politicians who are putting them back to work or who are passing bad legislation. And it has to go back to public education, to making sure that workers are understanding those connections, and then by putting pressure on through the various different federations, labor councils, and of course by the CLC to lobby and to push politicians to make the right decisions. It really has to be a group effort. It's not just going to be one or two people driving that particular car to that particular issue, but it's got to be the movement coming together to say, no, that's not fair bargaining, and we need to be treated as an equal, and you need to come to the table with something and not just legislate us back to work.
Thanks, Sister. I've got another one. Sister Elizabeth Haw got another meeting and tried to log on, and she's having some problems. Sister Elizabeth is a longtime OPSU activist, equity activist. She's a racialized person herself, and she's done lots of years with Justice for Migrant Workers. Pathetic happening out in Essex County with the migrant workers. So she talks about migrant workers' ability to unionize and all the other issues affecting them. And she talks about other marginalized people, certainly exacerbated during COVID, women, racialized people. What is your team's plan to care about our most vulnerable?
Really, really good points on all of those. And of course, I'm very familiar with the migrant worker file coming from UFCW. First and foremost, making sure that migrant workers and temporary foreign workers have the right to organize in the various different provinces through the employment standards legislation has to be key, because we can't actually move the needle forward if they can't actually unionize. So that's number one, making sure that migrant workers have access to things like employment insurance that they also pay into but don't necessarily reap the benefits of has to be a priority as well. And making sure that they have access to healthcare just like everybody else in this country does is a priority for us. And then when it comes to actually negotiating collective agreements for migrant workers, my local has done a tremendous amount of work ensuring that there's a pathway to citizenship. So we represent workers at Maple Leaf and Brandon, where we have 2,000 members that come from all over the world. And we've put language into those collective agreements that are published in multiple languages in terms of ensuring that the employer has to work with the individual and with the union to provide pathways for citizenship, to provide English language training, and provide settlement services. So that's how we as a movement have to approach that. When it comes to making sure that we make space for marginalized people, we are working very hard to make sure that with all of the committees, with all of the various different activities that we do, that we have voices of folks that aren't representative of the three of us. We need to make sure that in order for us to actually move the movement forward, we need to look like the movement and we need to be responsive to the movement, right? And that means looking like the workers that we represent. And that means making sure that those voices can be heard and be part of decision-making processes. So that is a very big priority for this team. We've been doing a lot of work and research on that aspect and are looking to engage with workers from various different backgrounds and, to make sure that we're not losing anything in that.
Thanks, sister. This was my question. I'm the Labor Council president. Just want to let you know my background. Past president of Windsor Catholic Teachers Union. And anyways, I concur with Dave and then Brian, Team Unite, Unifor, CAW, UAW, historic standard bearers of the labor movement and certainly in this community. And of course, as you know, across the country, all unions in this community are like family. Medi always says, OPSU member is married to a uniform member, a CUPE member married to a Catholic teaching member, and on it goes. We've got lots of history. Now to my question. CLC is a national organization, therefore there's national campaigns. And I'm going like this because when I'm going down, at times it feels like grassroots, the affiliates in Windsor Essex, for example, and Windsor District Labor Council, these people and others don't feel like they're allowed to have input. So we're looking for this way, right? How can you get grassroots, community across this nation to feel that they have some input? We understand that you've got to decide what a final campaign might look like, but we certainly need more of this and appreciate your thoughts on that.
Brian, that's something that Lily and Siobhan and I have been giving a lot of thought to. And of course, Siobhan, coming from a provincial labor body, may want to jump in on this and give some of her examples, but making sure that whatever campaigns we come across nationally can also be applied locally and that they're in good timing with what's happening on the ground has to be a priority. And that has to start with, first of all, making sure that the CLC is fully staffing all of the positions across the country. Of course, we understand there's some fiscal realities that we need to have a look at as well, but making sure that the resources are in the communities first and foremost is a priority so that there can be that good cross-reference and that good connection and information flow back and forth. And then the three of us are very committed to having regular and consistent conversations with not only federations of labor, but also labor councils and participating on a regular basis in various different meetings so that we can understand what the challenges are. Canada is a huge country, as we know, and there are significant differences between a Northern Manitoba situation and a Windsor, Ontario situation, but we need to be able to address them both. So making sure that we have really good communication flow has to be a key. Siobhan, did you want to add to that?
I guess I would add just in terms of like what leadership in my mind, what that looks like is like it looks both ways, which is we have to lift up the voices as well as like lead by telling people what we think, but that has to be a related relationship. It can't be, you can't talk down to members and tell them this is what you should care about, because I think that's where the mistakes happen and you're not talking about our issues. And we know that issues in this country, spread like wildfire. Like I know that in Manitoba, they're now introducing the legislation as a private members bill, what we're dealing with here in Alberta, which is the beginning of right to work in terms of dues collection. But also the other side is workers' rights and workers' issues. And so I do think we have to look at our systems and see why are we not hearing from the voices, and we need to just change that and make a space for that. And the district labor councils are a really great mechanism because this is where people gather, this is where they know where their community is, but then it takes leadership from the top to actually listen and ensure that those voices are framing what we're going to do. And I know at the AFL, like a lot of our campaigns has to be fielded by that, because quite honestly, if you're a leader at the top talking and you're not you don't have members behind you, you might as well be standing in your shower talking to yourself. This has to be a relationship. This has to be about workers' voices, and with intention and effort, you can make that happen.
Thanks.
Brian,
Yeah, go ahead, Mehdi.
I believe the Mark Vanderford is raised his hand, and I think he has a very quick comment. Is that Mark, you have a quick comment or you have a question?
Both. First of all, thanks Dave Cassidy for bringing that issue forward. I think we're weaker separate than and stronger together. And I appreciate the answer. First thing I'd like to say is I thank you three for the sacrifice you're about to make, and it will be a big sacrifice. I appreciate that. Second thing I'd like to say is it's wonderful to see three dynamic, powerful women, if I may say that, running for these positions. Maybe there is hope for us after all. You never know. But my question is very quick. Union density has been waning over the years. Is there any sort of philosophy or plan put in place to capture these young workers that are coming into the workplace and start to increase union density, through membership drives and things of that nature? I think now's the time, and I think if we miss this opportunity, I don't think we'll ever have it again. Thank you very much.
Mark, you're raising such an important point, and not only do we need to look at union density as a whole, but we also need to look at the reality that many of the new types of workplaces that are happening are part-time, they're gig economy, they're not necessarily traditional full-time jobs, right? And so that means also making sure that we're pushing for legislative changes so that we have the ability to bargain and to actually organize workers who don't necessarily have the same employment connection with their employer as the rest of us have had in our working careers. So that's where we have to start, by addressing that particular issue. But it goes back to making sure that we are raising the awareness with Canadian workers about the important work that unions do, because many people don't necessarily remember why unions exist, and they don't necessarily feel that unions are relevant in their life today. We, of course, know that we are, because we're doing the work and we know the difference that we make. But, it's going back to having campaigns like the Together Fairness Works aspect, which raises the reality and raises the awareness among Canadian workers about the fact that unions are here to make sure that you have good legislation so that you are protected in your workplace. And it goes beyond health and safety legislation. It's a fairness aspect. So making sure that we spread the word in that particular way. And that also means making sure that workers who are already unionized, to make sure that they want to be re-engaged in the labor movement within their unions, because we also need to build capacity internally with the workers that we already represent.
Thanks, sister. I especially like that second piece too. We got members that we gotta be there for them. Maddie and Bea and your team, I think we're just about at the end time. I don't think I see any more hands, but Bea and your team, if you want to do a wrap up, and then I'm sure you're going to whatever, Saskatoon or Halifax or somewhere. Go ahead.
Yep. We're going to Durham next in 10 minutes time, but I just want to say we really appreciated the opportunity to come and speak with all of you and to answer your questions. It is very important to all three of us that all three of us make it there, because we are a strong team, the three of us. We've been working very well together over the last number of months, and actually, quite frankly, it seems like years now. And we share the same values and the same energy to make change at the CLC. So I am hoping that you can support us and that you can support all three of us. And we have a website. I think that Siobhan shared that website earlier in the chat. We also want to ask for feedback. We don't always get it right. We recognize we bring lots of strengths and lots of our own experience to these roles, but we know we have a lot of things to learn as well. And so we do want to invite feedback, because we don't always necessarily know the answer or get it right. So if you have feedback for us, please feel free to reach out and send an email. We'd love to engage with you that way as well. And thank you so much for your time, everyone. But before I go, we would like to get a picture, if that's possible, of everyone. So if those of you who might want to be part of a picture, if you can, turn your camera on, we'd love to grab that. Siobhan is our picture taker extraordinaire, and we'd like to share that on social media just to say thank you for having us today. So I'll ask Siobhan to do that and let us know when she's ready.
Sure, just give it a couple seconds as people turn on their cameras and fix their hair. Perfect. And so, well done, Brian. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Excellent. Thank you so much, everyone. I got that screenshot. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks, sister.
Dankeschön.
Have a nice night.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.